at CSUN, right, even amidst our current conditions, and I hope everyone's safe and taking care of themselves. And so I think this is really a key time to talk about some of what HERE is doing and also what the Institute for Sustainability is doing. Not that, you know, every area we work in is not important, but it's this is a great way to highlight some of the issues that we're dealing with right now. So the HERE Center, as Nat mentioned, is newly chartered. I believe it is the most newly chartered center on campus, and it focuses on really improving the health equity. Health equity for individuals in the San Fernando Valley and surrounding communities, and really focusing on education, community academic partnerships, as well as health disparities research. So, you know, I want to emphasize a couple of things there. Part of it is responding to current conditions. And so if you can go to the website, you can read more about some of our initiatives related to what has been happening lately, and focusing on something that has been identified in public health for a while, that racism is a public health issue. Mm-hmm. And you can learn a little bit more about that through our director's statement on that that was put up over the summer, but also an initiative that has emerged as a result. So End the Silence, you may have already heard some of that. And so you're welcome to join in everything or as much as you can and you're interested in related to that. The other point I want to make is that really the focus is on community partnered participatory research as well. And so really working with the community. And so part of that initiative extends to identifying what the community needs based on what they identify, not necessarily based on the expertise coming out of CSUN, for instance. And so there are several initiatives that we're building related to that. And if you have some sort of interest or inclination, we are looking for partners all across. So community members, community organizations, faculty, students, really we're looking across the board, and we're about to launch a bit more of a standardized program so that we can match people up and see how we can support you. We don't have all the answers. A lot of this is dynamic, and we want to be responsive to what people are coming with, and not just saying we just have this program and we need to fit you in here, but it's also saying we know we have identified these needs and this is what the center supports at its core, but also responding to what's coming from the community around, not just CSUN, but beyond. And so really that's another focus that I want to emphasize is the San Fernando Valley. Yeah. So you'll see through the Toxic Tour that we talk about how, you know, the valley is somewhat forgotten in a couple of different ways, right? But still hosts a diversity of communities, environmental hazards, unfortunately, but also opportunities to counter that as well. And so really the focus is San Fernando Valley and surrounding communities. That is part of what the center is dedicated to doing in order to improve health equity. And I think in order to just be a little bit less verbose, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit more about health equity as it connects to environmental justice and environmental racism when we get to that part of the talk, because in that it'll be more of my personal interpretation through the work that I've done at HERE, at CSUN, not necessarily HERE. So then I can talk a little bit more about that as well. And then the other, you know, this is also, we do focus on biomedical sciences and biomedical science research, but also go beyond that. And in part, that is our inheritance as we came out of the Build Poder program, which a lot of you probably have heard about. And you know, Dr. Carrie Sattermo, and HERE Center is her vision, and she's extending the opportunity for more of us to help lead that way, and which is why we have some co-directors, and I have the pleasure and honor of being one of those at the moment. So if you have an interest, if you're just curious, go onto our website. It's still changing and shifting. Like I said, we're going to have that new partnership form appearing soon. There is one you can I just want to do it now. I don't want to forget. Go ahead, fill that out. But we're going to have something a little bit more streamlined to be more responsive to what the community needs.
Excellent.
So thank you. I think I'll stop there for now, but I'm happy to keep going if you want me to focus on something in particular.
Well, if you don't mind, just since I have you here, thinking of your work with the Institute as well. So you mentioned here, but in your capacity, or as you've served as a liaison for the sustainability minor, maybe you could talk just a little bit about some of the the projects, or just some of the focuses of the minor, and how it might intersect with some of the things we're going to talk about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the wonderful opportunities being part of the HERE Center now is being able to expand a really important area of environmental health determinants, and how those connect to health inequities and health disparities. And so my time at CSUN has really focused on teaching up until recently, even though early on I was like, we need to get the students involved. They're asking for it, even if I'm teaching a theory-based class. And I started in health sciences because of my background. I've actually worked in several departments, but health sciences and sustainability are my main homes. And I had the pleasure of serving as the sustainability minor liaison for a while. So if you actually have any questions related to that, I'm happy to answer them. And I can direct you to the coordinator as well, so we can get your questions answered. But it's a program that has been growing and very much connected to the Institute, right, for sustainability. And when that came on, I was really already had established a bunch of service learning components to the class, and working also with a capstone class. And this is where we had a lot of opportunities to join and focus on these different initiatives with partners on the ground. So the students could come up with their own projects for the capstone, and as within certain parameters, of course. But the idea was for them to partner with some entity, some on campus, some off campus, and then address a particular need, but really not, really having it match up as much as possible. And then COVID happened too. So that was, of course, very interesting. But we ended up having these wonderful programs. So some, Nat, you were served as that liaison for the CSUN Seed Savers. So we're going to have our own, there's this burgeoning like seed bank at the Institute for Sustainability. We also have these other so that's a little bit more looking at the history and talking to people. And then we have others that are focusing on improving the footprint of CSUN and use a lot more of the natural sciences in that project. We have others that supported teachers in schools to develop climate science related modules. We have others that worked on virtual campaigns on fast fashion versus, so fast fashion was one of them. Another one was Breathe with Breathe LA, working on an air pollution campaign. So focusing not only, and they're really focused on like lung health, but also have bridged into this whole area of sustainability, environmental concerns. And we continue to work with them as well. In a lot of these groups, we continue to work with them, or other instructors are now working with them, or HERE has engaged in different projects that have branched out with them as well. So those are just some of the projects where students have been able to use some interest that they have, perhaps something from their major, or even just usually it's from their major, because I try to tie in what they're coming in with, what sort of transferable skills they can continue building on, as at the point they're in the capstone, obviously they're in the sustainability minor, so that when they get out of that pipeline, they have a stronger, resume, and they're not just checking off, the classes that they need for the minor.
Yeah, I think what's so exciting about that focus is, and again, it'll lead to our discussion now about, where do you start when you talk about sustainability? For many of us, until recently, it started with or it started and ended with maybe the recycle bin, or or solar panel or something that you just put on a timer of some sort, you just kind of do, and not really, it's kind of divorced from some of these, the health equity issues as you've discussed, or the racism, this kind of the systemic structures that are really, you can't separate from sustainability and from environmental issues. And so this has been, there's definitely I think an opportunity. So I'm glad we were able to, I'm glad Nikhil, thank you Nikhil for helping set this up, because I think it's, we're all kind of rethinking not only the way we consume, of course, and the way we commute and the way everything, but now is a good time to think about these deeper structures and how they reinforce each other, but also how we could, by recognizing them and connecting them, we could see how it's like as it was initially framed, the title was kind of the missing pillar, or it was a third pillar, or I forgot how the title was, but environmental racism, environmental justice is a core pillar of sustainability, right? A lot of times you talk about the triple bottom line, right? But as you emphasize in your courses, it's the social piece is sometimes it has caught up to the other kinds of more the infrastructure pieces, I think, as a priority, which is really exciting. So so maybe let's begin actually talk maybe for everybody. I'm sure all of you have someone just asked a quick question about the sustainability major. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Lisa. I could talk about I know the master's of sustainability is imminent. It's just about ready to be launched next fall. As we'll see what happens with COVID. Might have changed a lot of our plans, but it was scheduled to start next fall. The bachelor's, I don't know where exactly that is at this point.
I'm not privy necessarily to all of that information, but I know we were moving forward on it would make sense, right? Minor, major, and then master.
right.
And like you said, it's like a lot. I'm so glad that students are asking for it, and I wish, like, if we know folks, especially here, I know we have kind of a broader range. It's not just instructors and students, but others. Like, if there's that, I'd love to hear more about that, because we need it. I think we need it. The more voices we have, different voices, the better. So I know that they started the process, some hiccups, so it's kind of on standby right now. But the master's is further along.
Master's is definitely since I was on a lot of those planning for that last semester, and it's been a long road for many of you, as many of you know, but it seems it's just about there, so that's really exciting. So that will probably put the squeeze on the bachelor's, I guess, I imagine. Hopefully. Right? Like you said,
Hopefully.
And then a PhD program right down there.
There you go.
So let's talk about, and I know a lot of folks here are already familiar with this term, but it'd be great to maybe during question and answer to hear what everyone's different perspectives might be. But maybe if you don't mind, Lisa, if I ask you to go first, sorry, just and then I could.
You want me to go first?
Well, just when you think of environmental racism, or you've touched on it, but what is what kinds of things come to mind, or how would you frame it or identify it?
Right. So when I talk about environmental racism, environmental justice, in my classes, I have to say I focus more in my classes on looking at that health disparities element of it. So we end up talking about these social determinants of health. So focusing, poverty, education, income, and then how do we look at these other demographic factors that come into play? So race, ethnicity, definitely come into play. And when we talk about environmental justice, you can't really talk about it without talking about health disparities. health disparities, not just inequalities, but some sort of disadvantage, economic, environmental, social disadvantage, and connecting to that whole idea of it's unfair, unjust.
Yeah.
And so when I focus more up until now, looking at it more from that lens, but looking at what other groups have been focusing on, and really the environmental justice movement has come out of the social justice movement here in the United States. And some of those first reports that were more comprehensive is, looking at poverty and race is really indicating where you're going to see those hazardous, landfill sites. And Warren County being really that time when it became national news, right? And kind of pinned as that point in time where environmental justice started, not started more as a movement to be well known, not that it wasn't happening before. So within the, realm of health and public health, there is this inherent idea of social justice within that too. So it's really, they almost, go hand in hand, and including the responses to that, whether it's regulation, development of different, entities like your EPA, whether they've done what they should do or not. Of course, that's a different story. And so really, those are some of those key points that I bring up when we talk about environmental justice. It's really hard for me not to look at the sustainability component without the health, component intersecting for this particular area. And then we abound in our examples here in Los Angeles at large. And as we're realizing through our new project, the mapping, health and hazards mapping project that includes the toxic tour, we're trying to investigate more systematically what's happening in the valley. Absolutely. So that's
excellent. I think, I obviously share much of your, how you think about it and frame it. I've come from a food justice perspective, working for food justice nonprofits, volunteering in that capacity, urban farming, that kind of thing. And obviously those intersect with health, right? Equity and food deserts and food related diseases or lack of access to food, healthy food, gardens, green spaces. And so I also have this, as a historian, I come at this from thinking about a historian who looks at early America and looks at kind of this, and pre 1492, so indigenous America, thinking about indigenous landscapes and traditional ecological knowledge. I think that knowledge as well, to understand place and importance of place and deep histories of places that we all inhabit, whether we're native or not native, are so crucial to understanding these later ongoing layers of environmental injustice as it appears in both urban and rural areas, and native and non-native landscapes. I think also, in my classes, I especially my environmental history classes, even students who live in LA, and I have behind me in the virtual background, those are the Santa Monica Mountains, right, just south of campus, and it's right in our backyard. These spaces that have, the environmental movement has, as we know, has historically been insular in its, has done a lot of great things for preserving natural landscapes and national parks and preserving nature, but it has also excluded communities of color, marginalized communities, urban communities, right? They see historically, and that's changing, but this idea of environmentalism as a separating nature, quote unquote nature, from the urban area. And I think as a result, we have this, I see it in my students even today, we have these jewels hidden in plain sight that we don't tap into, or we just think of nature as out there, and LA is the hellscape of industry, or, of the, that's a little bit of a strong word, but, the LA is the antithesis of nature, right? Because sprawl is all around us and all that. But if you look between the sprawl, I think you'll find lots of interesting examples of nature or examples of regeneration. And I think that's part of it is looking at the history. That's really an effective tool. So I think, yeah, there's lots of great I mean, we've been talking about this since we met, and maybe this is a good way to introduce our, how we came up with this idea with Carrie and Steve Graves in geography. I'm going to ask you again to maybe just do a brief introduction, just because since since you've been working with Carrie, and you guys came up with this idea. So maybe tell us everyone.
Yeah, can I just acknowledge before I forget, we have a really interesting question from John, who asks, I don't know that we'll be able to answer all of it right now, but maybe throughout, and then especially during the Q&A, what about climate gentrification and climate migration when addressing environmental racism? Absolutely. So I just want to acknowledge that we, saw that question. I'd like to maybe circling back to it, because there's a lot in there, right?
Sure.
That we need to talk about, unless you want to take it on right now, Nat.
Why not? Go for it, Karen. Go for it, Carrie. Go for it, Lisa.
Yeah. No, I'd like to, maybe after, once we go through a little bit of the toxic tour.
Yeah, I think the toxic tour will actually gets to some of these questions that we're thinking about. So
okay, all right. So John, hold on a little bit, if you don't mind. So actually, I think Nat, you were part of the mapping project idea before I was.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yes,
But
Carrie's such a visionary, right? And trying to understand how we need to work together to address some of these key problems. So not just, trying to think of how do we serve our students and learn from them, and, work with them and train them to be these really ethical researchers, or and beyond that, right? And then also addressing needs that we see in the Valley, addressing this health equity element that spans from racism to air pollutants and everything in between. And I mean, you would actually know a little bit more about how we were talking about what's happening in the Valley. It's like you have these toxic tours. I mean, I actually, I wasn't even part of those. I know Carrie took part in some of those, right? Toxic tours in other parts of LA. So the Exide battery factory and these other sites that are on the other side of Los Angeles County. However, we know in our backyard, I mean, we have the Santa Susana Field Labs. We have Aliso Canyon, which when we talk about environmental justice, those communities surrounding those areas are a little bit different than your norm that you see across the country. Generally, we're looking at these toxic sites surrounded by poor communities of color, for the most part, but those two I mentioned are a little bit different. However, the expanse of the toxicity found in those goes way beyond the local communities. Right. And so the idea was to try and bring together some of the expertise and interest across campus to evaluate this and to disseminate it into different audiences like this one. But we also are engaging in different projects to address the research side of it, in addition to further down the line do some more application intervention type work, and so there are a lot of different elements that are under that umbrella. And maybe you want to add a little bit more about Steve Graves and geography being involved. I think you have more accurate information than I do on that.
Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, I think our initial, I think we're going to be changing we're probably going to ultimately change the name of it, but I think the idea was you know, people go on nature tours, right? They go on tours of what they think of as the environment, right? And again, it plays on this hidden in plain sight, these spaces in LA that are ignored or just kind of driven by, or not really understood. Yet it does impact, even if you don't live in that community. If you know, especially if it's about air or water, it's going to impact you eventually. So the idea was having a tour of these spaces, and this is something that I used to teach at Whittier College, and not far from the Exxon battery plant, and many other toxic waste sites like the landfills and the port and, of LA. So a lot of the students were from these areas, and so we would have these tours. We would lead these tours and incorporate, you know, it was kind of team taught. So you'd have different faculty from different departments giving their perspectives on these different areas. And it was really a powerful tool, a great way for students to understand their city, but also get them connected with groups that were actually, you know, fighting or trying to overcome or trying to restore and fix these solutions. So it wasn't just simply gazing at disasters and going on to the next thing. It was, well, here are these organizations that are doing X, Y, and Z, and you could actually join. So it was very action oriented, and it was really inspiring for the students. And so that was something that, and I've gone on toxic tours in Houston at Rice University. They have a really interesting, operation. They have community members that basically work with faculty to give the tour, and you can go on these like two-day tours of all these different sites around Houston. And then again, you learn about how folks are having some progress, right? Not simply that they're victims, right? And this is the important part, I think. But also getting to some of these questions about Houston's like LA in terms of climate gentrification, of course, and climate migration and all these kinds of local and global issues. So that was the idea, is how can we do that in the Valley? So initially we wanted to both have a virtual version, which we're going to show you in a second, but also initially we wanted to actually do a tour, like a real tour, get in a bus or whatever, and take the students on a tour starting with the Valley, and focus on the Valley because there are plenty of places to focus on, and then incorporate this this virtual, because Steve Graves, who's in geography, is, as many of you probably know, is a GIS, amazing GIS wizard. I don't know if he likes being called that, but I always call him that, magician, however you want to call it, but really does really great work, like many folks in geography. So the idea is you can actually map these spaces and tell stories around them. And then, so with COVID, we couldn't do that. So then it was like, well, what are we going to do? We have all this information. We've got this stuff that we're talking about. We're excited about it. How could we try it out? So then Steve helped us. Well, Steve made the story map and a lot of the GIS stuff. And then we plugged in, and Lisa as well. And we plugged in all of these sites, which we'll show you. So that's kind of so we see this as it's a work in progress, and it's something that we want to keep adding on and kind of keep trotting it out on a roadshow and develop it. And what we like about it is it's like almost like an open source, not technically open source, but something that you could actually offer even in this talk, perhaps say, hey, have you looked at this site or thought about this? And we can keep building on it. That's what's really, I think, exciting about this. It's a conversational piece, I think. So maybe I'll share the screen and so we could, before I do that, let me make sure I have it open.
Yes, it takes a little bit of bandwidth, and
yeah, exactly.
We're at 12:35.
Yeah, so we won't have too much. So we'll do a quick one, maybe just kind of, I don't know, what do you think? Just
I think we've done a lot of the background part.
Okay, good.
And this, we will share the
so you guys could all see that?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lisa, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, we'll just share the site, the link to this, so you can take a look at it, because we have some videos. We're not going to show all the videos, And then there's like a 7-8 minute interview with someone from Aliso, that's involved in Aliso Canyon. So that's Food and Water Watch, the organization, and the California director, Alexander Alex Nagy. So you can go ahead and look at that and your own time, offer us some comments, suggestions. We're open. This is just one version. It's more of an intro version. And as you can see, it's more like, kind of you would view it, not necessarily having us hosting it. So you'd read a little bit more about the uniqueness of San Fernando Valley. We're looking at it in the map right here. Broadly speaking, we know it's actually interpreted in different ways, but you can see where the San Fernando Valley lies and how expansive it is, and where it lies compared to Los Angeles.
I think Steve has, we have a little intro here that it's framing that, as many of you know, right? The Valley is, if it was its own city, I think it was, be, as it says here, around 2 million people. It would rank one of the 5 largest cities in the US, right? Yet it's, it's like it's something on the other side of the hill, right? Is kind of how it's seen. And so obviously this is preaching to the choir. We know how big and how diverse and how interesting the Valley is. So we do have, we start of course with the history, recognizing, acknowledging Tataviam, that this is Tataviam land. The Tataviam Nation is still here. In fact, the Institute, we're collaborating with them with American Indian Studies to like the UCs and other institutions to have a formal tribal acknowledgement that will be part of the kind of the administrative infrastructure, but also getting Tataviam landscapes on campus, whether it be, we obviously already have native plants from the Valley, but really having some educational component to that and kind of recognizing Tataviam ecological knowledge. And so we're working with folks from there's a Tataviam Land Conservancy that's its mission, is to provide new spaces to grow and to plant traditional native plants, but also doing education around that. So when we give this tour, we kind of start with that, basically centering everyone in this Tataviam space. And then and Lisa, feel free to rush me along, or just, so we kind of move through these, these mapping. This is what of course we know the Valley is CSUN still has its existing orchard from this citrus period, right? Well, much of it, from the mission period to the Rancho period to early U.S. through the early 20th century was orchards and Mediterranean foodscapes that really dominated the Valley. And you can see here one of these early maps or early U.S. maps from the late 20th century, actually, kind of just when LA was really expanding. And you can see here the LA River, which was not channelized at that point. So then what Steve does is, what he did is he kind of shows some of these sites, these toxic sites, and then we have these little videos that you guys could watch later on. And Lisa, feel free to just jump in at any point if you think I should stop anywhere. So
we could show one of them, perhaps.
Sure. Which one do you think, Santa Susana or? Well, we'll just do Santa Susana because
we can do, let's do, we can do that one, or just the one that's about to, I don't know, we'll see. Sometimes it's a little glitchy when you, show it on Zoom. Okay. Oh, remember, we have to make sure you click on sharing the video.
Shoot. Right.
Audio when you do the share screen, or we can, or we can just wait.
It's only 2 minutes.
You reminded me last time. While you're doing that, why don't I answer a question?
Sure.
There's a question. While you just get, so is there something that focuses on Pacoima? So I believe in this one, we do see one of the sites focuses on Pacoima, and that is an area that we want to expand on. So I'd love to hear a little bit more of your interest and knowledge of Pacoima. I just, so we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So one of the later stops actually takes us to part of Pacoima.
So you can imagine, of course, if we were actually driving around here, this is what we're trying to replicate in some ways, right? So we'll just show for
at a place
just
called
2 minutes,
Sage
so you get a
Ranch,
sense of.
which is a nice place to come
You guys
and
can
hike,
hear it now, right?
but it's also
Yes.
adjacent to the Santa Susana Field Lab, one of the most in all of Southern California.
So come with me as I take a walk around Sage Ranch, and we can take a look a little bit at the natural beauty before we get to the unnatural elements of this part of the San Fernando Valley.
And as Steve talked, just by the way, we did put the link, the story map link for this whole
So
site.
what
You
you're
can take a look
seeing
at later.
here as I pan around is the warning signs. Don't enter this location. Behind these signs is the Santa Susana Field Lab, which once housed a nuclear reactor that had a partial meltdown. The Santa Susana Field Lab was also home to America's space program. From the 1950s through the late 80s, this area was used to test the rockets that sent astronauts to the moon and missiles that were luckily never sent towards the USSR. The area was closed down around 2006, but remains a great deal of controversy surrounding the cleanup and the pollution that was left behind. Cancer rates are reputedly higher in the immediate adjacent area, and Boeing, who owns the site now, was fined only a few years ago for polluting the Bell Creek and Los Angeles River.
So, we'll probably, you could see there's a bunch of sites we're going to keep. You can imagine this is going to get more and more populated. Importantly, though, we do have I just want to jump to the end if that's all right. But unless is it another one you think we should talk about, Lisa?
No, and I do understand it does work a lot better when you're on your own site on Zoom. It just tends to be a little bit glitchy. It is more of a story map, more interactive in that sense than what you're seeing now. So we apologize for that.
Yeah, we're kind of rushing through, but just hopefully giving you a sense of our vision and kind of how we're thinking about things. We do have, very importantly, this is something we want to also build on is toxic tour. Is why we might reframe it. We have these instances of maybe some of you are familiar with Cottonwood Urban Farms, and there's other farms and other, of course, there are plenty of nonprofits and organizations that are doing regenerative work, transforming the soil. Like Cottonwoods Farms is a small CSA, about 3 or 4 acres in Panorama City, that has converted some of this industrial landscape into a really fertile, organic, life-giving space in the valley. And so there's lots of examples of this that we're going to be adding onto the tour as well, because again, we think it's important to show how it's a dynamic conversation, that it's unfolding, and that it continues. So, and we have a little link to Elliot Kuhn, who's the farmer who gives a talk in his farm about how he thinks about soil and how he converted some of this space in Panorama City. And I see we got a lot of comments actually. So I don't know if Lisa, if you want to maybe talk about.
I'm going to talk about, if that's okay, just like
please.
Aliso Canyon for just a couple of minutes. And it actually addresses one of the chat points about community partnerships established when constructing the story maps and community involvement. So that's a great question. Thank you for that, Rosa. And
do you want me to put it? Do you want me to put that on there? Or?
Well, it just takes you. If you want to just scroll past it, it's fine, because we're not going to turn it on. It's an interview. You have a portion of an interview with the California director of Food and Water Watch and the local and so Alexandra Nagy is now the California director for Food and Water Watch, and has been involved. Actually, it's a little bit higher up. It's like the middle
Okay.
of the story map.
Oh, okay.
And so those are one of the, that's one of the community partners that has been involved with the HERE Center. And one thing that I just want to
There we go.
mention, kind of
This is it
stepping
right here.
back, is that with these toxic tours, it's actually,
Oh,
there we go.
sorry.
There we go. So this, no, you're there. That's okay. And so that's one, you were there
Oh, I
on
was there.
that YouTube
Okay.
link there, a little bit below that. Yeah, you were right there. So this is just one example of one community partnership that we've had for a while. Maybe it was, napping for a while, and we're back up and running. And we really want to see how we can support some of the work that that they're trying to do to shut down Aliso Canyon being a site. So I see some mention of, a lot of people don't know about Santa Susana Field Lab and the importance of it as, a site for a huge meltdown and everything that has, ensued since, or hasn't, in terms of like cleanups and stuff. And site of the Woolsey fire, where the Woolsey fire, went over, and how that has impacts on populations, communities, far beyond the site. And it's a pretty expansive site. And if we had time, we talk about also about some of the indigenous, groups that are also involved or not involved in that because of the cultural, artifacts there. But also, I want to mention that, Aliso Canyon again is a storage facility for natural gas, and site of the largest blowout in U.S. history. We're almost coming up to the fifth anniversary of that blowout, and we still don't have a comprehensive health study on that. And that's something that Food Water Watch, in collaboration with other partners, so we have Safe Porter Ranch is one of them. There's Aliso Moms Alliance, and others that are trying to get it shut down once and for all. And under Gavin Newsom, we've actually quietly seen increasing permits for different fossil fuel related activities, and increase in the use. I believe it has been stated, I haven't vetted all this info, but 3,000% increase in the use of the Aliso Canyon gas facility. And right around is a pretty rich, suburb of actually, if you look at it national scale, it's high up there, but also however, the health repercussions go far beyond that. There hasn't been an established study to understand all of the health repercussions of all of these polytoxins that have been emanated in different forms within the surrounding communities. And so there's that they're calling for, all these groups, and in addition to trying to push there's going to be a study that's being done by local government, and to have it done well, because there's been a lot of back and forth about what is being done, what isn't being done, and what sort of political cloud is being put on Department of Public Health, or or politicians, because SoCal Gas is a smaller company of Sempra Energy, so these are the ones that own Aliso Canyon, the natural gas facility, have so much power, political power. And there are some links talking about, how they may be misusing ratepayer money to buy political influence. There are also some links to other aspects of what's going on with Aliso Canyon. By far, it is not comprehensive. We are actually considering we should do just a whole toxic tour on Aliso Canyon itself once we get a little bit further into this. So I'll stop there, because I know we want to spend some time answering more questions. We have a little bit under 10 minutes, and we definitely want to hear from folks because they have some great things to say.
Yeah. So feel free, anyone, to jump in with a chat, or maybe if we want to return to that question John had asked, perhaps we could start with that, about climate gentrification. You mentioned Aliso Canyon, which is an interesting, it's a different set of factors, I guess, but maybe you want to talk about that, climate, your thoughts about that, and as it pertains to perhaps LA or just, or anybody. I mean, if they have some thoughts about, how could, I guess, yeah, John, go ahead. Since you asked the question, yeah.
I've kind of been wondering, since we've been talking about Long Beach, the state of California, and the United States, housing and homeless problems, none of the groups never addressed climate gentrification and climate migration, which is going on in this country for years now.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Long Beach CAAP, the cap that the city's talking about, and about how Naples, Belmont Shores, and other areas are going to be inundated by sea level rise and everything. There's no mention of these words in there, or talks about how it's going to affect Long Beach. So how do we fix the problems, or try to, if we don't address everything that's going to be affected by climate change and sea level rise?
Right. You mentioned, of course, that with housing, right? There's this. This is a perfect example of separating that, seeing it as a homelessness and housing affordability, and housing shortage, or this as two separate crises. Is not directly related to sustainability or climate change. And I think you're right. I think that's where they has to start with that. And part of it, I guess, is about that local political power, right? Where it comes from, and how you could have it represent the communities who are on the climate front lines, right? And have them in as part of the conversation. So I do think is, for some, sustainability has been it's a political issue right from the beginning. But for others, right, they see it as kind of just simply a personal issue that's, a virtuous thing, and not really a local policy thing, or they just see it as a federal thing and not like a local policy thing that's about the way they consume, or the way where they live, or how they're living, right? And that's why it's such a tough conversation, I think, to start, right? For folks like in Naples, right, in these places that are think about the climate in one way, but then they don't have to think about it in those other ways. What's your sense, Lisa?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I had to step away. It's for a second there, or a minute there. It's the whole homeschooling, right?
Yes.
My little one's still kind of little. Have to be more hands-on there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We were on John's question, right? About.
Yeah.
If I'll just answer kind of a little bit more broadly that,
yeah.
You're right. This climate crisis, we have so much that we need to address, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in the coasts, we really have to focus on different factors than if you're in northern latitudes, right? Or if you're in Mediterranean climate, we're dealing with a whole host of other issues than if we're, thinking of our counterparts just on the East Coast right now, South, in the South. The reaction has to be comprehensive, and in one reason that's why it's so complicated, right? We have to look at it from this just much more complex approach to addressing the problem, but it has to be contextualized. And a lot of it, you're right that we're not, where are we, there was just an article, what was it this week, like where are all these people going to move to if they have to move? If we're talking about how we're going to see significant changes in our ecosystem as a result of all of these fires that continue to rampage the West, for instance, where are we going to relocate to, because we won't be able to support them? And especially you're dealing with, people who are marginalized, so poor and communities of color that will be and are being more significantly affected. And that's at the heart of what we talk about in environmental justice, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's not a good answer. You probably know all of that, but
Right.
You're right. We're not doing a very good job. job of answering that. And I think one of the aspects that the climate activists are focusing on as well, not only is that if we, and especially in response to what's been happening over the summer, is, you know, climate justice will address some of this environmental racism and social justice. But it's really, we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But there are also some great groups and folks trying to address all of that. And I don't know enough about Long Beach to talk more specifically about that, even though I'm aware of some of the issues.
Yeah.
So
I think,
thank you for bringing that up.
yeah, this is great. I love this. I mean, John mentioned this idea of, as we've talked, you know, thinking about these alliances as an ecosystem, right? Just like we do. I think the more we can think about, you know, how an ecosystem works, how it works well, it's about alliance. It's about a web of interests that do overlap, especially, and the more you could create solutions around that, I think the more impactful it'll be, the more resilient it will be, and the more sustainable it will be. So just thinking really quick on a specific Insitute priority note, the IS, you know, Institute for Sustainability, we have our eyes also, you know, we're thinking about the Valley, of course, but we know our students come from all around LA, right? And so we want to also dip into these and help build and maybe create new alliances with folks in South LA or East LA or, you know, wherever, especially wherever our students are, because, you know, I love to think of like the LA River as a great example, because the LA River cuts right by campus, but it also goes right through Long Beach, right? It cuts right through the heart of the city, and it doesn't know those boundaries, right? It's a good way to kind of think about how not only different areas of the city, but also different interests could overlap and align. And like Lisa said, I think we know that you have to start with the community needs, and this justice orientation, I think, and then you could really move to sustainability. I think, I mean, obviously you can have them both going on at the same time, but I do think now more than ever, especially in urban areas like LA, it has to start with the community and the community needs, and that reparative focus, and then that will in some ways help take care of some of these climate issues, rather than the other way around, where you have the homeowners having the NIMBY kind of thing and wanting to protect, but still being, you know, quote unquote sustainable, right? But not really addressing any of these other really essential issues. I mean, in the end, sustainability, again, it is about community. If you don't have that web intact, it doesn't matter what you do. The water, the climate, the tsunami is going to come for you. Something's going to come for you from nature, that if you're not resilient, and you don't have resiliency without community. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I guess it's part of what this is about too for this hour. So I know we come to an hour. We really appreciate your time, everybody. And definitely I think there are some, Alex mentions about the Valley, right? The Valley has certainly been, I think it's always like the edges, right? Because I know at Whittier, when I was at Whittier, East LA, they saw themselves as a kind of a forgotten corner of the city as well, right? All these, but this is where all the people are too. This is where all the energy, I think, is, and this is where the solutions are going to come from too. So we'll stop there, I think. I don't know if Lisa wanted to have any last words.
Yes, especially related to those last comments. And thank you, everyone. And we do realize some of you have to leave, and I will as well in a minute or so here. But you know, yes, alliances are really important. We have identified San Fernando Valley, you know, because we are the university here, and we should be serving our community better around the San Fernando Valley. We do see the importance and value of extending beyond. And if you have that link, John, for instance, or Alex in Pacoima, you know, having that as a community member, as a student, go into the Here Center, fill out that interest form. Tell us what you have, what you bring to the table, what you'd like us to do. And even if it's not specifically here, if it's not all health related, there are areas for focusing on environmental health, looking for allies, etc. We'll pass that information along to Nat, for instance, or the Institute. for sustainability. So absolutely, we hear that we can only do so much. So this is our starting point, but we do hear what you're saying. And absolutely, if we have folks who can help and support and need some support as well, then please let us know, and that we're here to respond to that. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for inviting me, Nat.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great honor. I'm looking forward to building on our toxic tour database. So we'll see you all soon. Hopefully we have these pretty regularly now. So hopefully we'll see you all soon. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate the comments and everything. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.